You've probably heard that history is written by the victors. It's a powerful and memorable phrase. But what you might not know is that it's financed by the bankers. Behind the grand tapestry of European history, with its kings, its empires, and its epic, continent-spanning wars, there was a hidden power. A force working not in the halls of Parliament or on the fields of battle, but in the quiet, methodical world of finance. This power was pulling the strings of entire economies, deciding the fates of nations not with cannons but in their ledger books. This wasn't a king, a general, or an emperor. It was a family, a dynasty that clawed its way out of the most unlikely, most oppressive circumstances imaginable to become the wealthiest and most powerful family on earth. In doing so, they created the very system of international finance that runs our world today. They were the architects of a financial revolution, the secret bankers to kings, and for centuries the targets of awe, jealousy, and dangerous myth. Their story isn't just about getting rich. It's about inventing a whole new kind of power, a power that could cross borders, ignore flags, and ultimately shape the modern world. What if I told you that the modern world of finance, the entire complex system that powers our global economy, the system that allows money to flash across the planet in an instant, was designed in its essence by a single family? A family that began their journey walled off from the world in a German ghetto, who rose to become the secret financiers behind kings and empires, funding their wars and rebuilding their nations. This is the incredible story of a father and his 5 sons who, armed with a revolutionary idea and unbreakable unity, didn't just make a fortune, they conquered the world of money itself. This is the story of the Rothschilds. Our story doesn't start in a palace or a grand estate, but in the cramped, oppressive, and often dangerous alleys of the Frankfurter Judengasse, the Jewish ghetto of Frankfurt, Germany. In the mid-18th century, this wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a prison. It was a narrow, half-mile-long street, walled off from the rest of the city, with gates that were locked every night, on Sundays, and on all Christian holidays. Thousands of Jewish families were forced to live here, stacked in overcrowded tenements, subject to harsh, discriminatory laws and the constant threat of prejudice and violence. Life was a daily struggle for survival and dignity. Yet within these walls, a spirit of fierce resilience, deep community, and sharp intellect thrived. This is where Meyer Amschel Rothschild was born in 1744. His world was defined by walls, both literal and figurative. As a Jew in the Holy Roman Empire, a chaotic patchwork of hundreds of tiny states and principalities, he was barred from most professions, forbidden from owning land outside the ghetto, and burdened with special, punitive taxes. His father, Amschel Moses Rothschild, was a small-time tradesman and money changer who did business from the ground floor of their shared home. The house, like others on the street, didn't have a number but a symbol. His was a red shield, a Rothschild in German. That simple sign hanging over a humble ghetto business would one day become the symbol of a global empire. Meyer was a bright boy, and his parents intended for him to become a rabbi, a life of scholarly devotion. But this path was tragically cut short. When he was just 12 years old, a smallpox epidemic swept through the ghetto and both of his parents died. Orphaned and alone, Meyer had to survive. The responsibility fell on his relatives, who recognized his intelligence with numbers. They made a decision that would alter the course of financial history. Instead of the rabbinical school, they sent him to Hanover to apprentice at the banking firm of Simon Wolf Oppenheimer, prominent court Jews who handled the finances of the nobility. This wasn't just a job, it was a real-world PhD in the art of money. In 18th century Germany, moving between principalities was like moving between countries. Each had its own ruler, its own laws, and its own currency. A dizzying array of thalers, gulden, and ducats, all with different weights and values, made trade a nightmare. Money changers and bankers were the essential grease in this rusty economic machine. At Oppenheimer's, Mayer learned the intricate business of currency exchange, but he also gained exposure to a world far beyond the ghetto walls, the world of high finance, serving wealthy, powerful clients. He developed a particular passion that would become his secret weapon, the study of rare and ancient coins. He became an expert numismatist, learning the history, rarity, and intrinsic value of coins from across the ages. This niche expertise was more than a hobby, it was his ticket out. Returning to Frankfurt in his late teens, he started his own small business, trading these rare coins and other antiques. He built a reputation for being scrupulously fair, utterly reliable, and possessing an encyclopedic knowledge. This reputation soon attracted wealthy collectors, including powerful nobles looking to add to their cabinets of curiosities. His most important client turned out to be General von Estorff. The general, a keen coin enthusiast himself, was deeply impressed by the young man's sharp mind, his expertise, and his solid character. This personal connection changed everything. Why? Because General von Estorff was in the service of one of the wealthiest men in all of Europe, Crown Prince Wilhelm of Hesse. The introduction was made, and suddenly Meyer Amschel Rothschild was in the orbit of immense power and unimaginable wealth. Prince Wilhelm, who would soon become Landgrave Wilhelm IX, was fantastically rich. A significant portion of his fortune came from the grim but highly profitable business of renting out his Hessian soldiers as mercenaries to foreign powers. Most famously, thousands of his soldiers were leased to his cousin, King George III of Great Britain, to fight against the colonists in the American Revolutionary War. Meyer started by selling the prince rare coins, often at a loss, just to gain his favor and prove his value. Wilhelm, a shrewd man, quickly saw that this humble man from the ghetto had a financial mind like no other. He began entrusting Meyer with small financial tasks which were always executed flawlessly. In 1769, a new sign, a symbol of immense pride and a crucial step up, went up over Meyer's little shop. It read, M. A. Rothschild, Court Agent to the Prince of Hesse Castle. That title was a game changer. A court agent, or court Jew, was an official position that granted special privileges. It allowed him to leave the ghetto without a permit and, most importantly, gave him direct access to the finances of the nobility. It was still a shaky position, relying entirely on the prince's favor, but for Meyer, it was the chance of a lifetime. He was no longer just a coin dealer, he was a trusted financial manager to royalty. And then, history came knocking with a battering ram. The French Revolution exploded in 1789, sending shockwaves of terror and revolutionary fervor across Europe, kicking off decades of war. For most people, the Napoleonic Wars meant chaos, destruction, and death. For Meyer Amschel Rothschild, they were the single biggest business opportunity in history. When Napoleon's armies marched on Hesse in 1806, Prince Wilhelm had to flee into exile. He had one overwhelming problem: how to protect his massive fortune from being seized by the French. He turned to his most trusted court agent. In a move that would seal the Rothschild family's destiny, Wilhelm secretly handed over a huge portion of his wealth, cash, bonds, and other securities worth millions, to Meyer for safekeeping. The risk was staggering. If Napoleon's forces discovered it, they would seize it all, and Rothschild would likely be executed. Hiding it wasn't enough. The money had to be managed, protected, and put to work. This was the ultimate test of Meyer's skill and loyalty. He didn't just hide the money in his wine cellar, as some legends claim. He made a daring, visionary choice. He secretly sent the funds to his third son, a brilliant and gutsy young man who had recently set up a business in the one place safe from Napoleon's grasp: England. His name was Nathan. That single act, born from a prince's fear and a banker's courage, laid the foundation for a global financial dynasty. The immense wealth of Hesse, now in the hands of the Rothschilds, was about to become the seed money for an empire. Mayer Amschel Rothschild wasn't just a brilliant banker, he was a visionary patriarch. He knew that for his family to not just survive but to dominate, it had to grow and expand, bound by absolute unity and a single audacious goal. He looked at the map of Europe not as a collection of warring countries, but as a single interconnected financial chessboard. And he had 5 sons, his 5 arrows, ready to be placed as the key pieces. The name came from a parable he often told his children. A single arrow can be easily broken, but a bundle of 5 arrows is unbreakable. This became the core principle of his empire. Unity is strength. Mayer's idea was nothing short of revolutionary. Banking in the late 18th and early 19th centuries was a mostly local or, at best, a national affair. He imagined a truly international family-run business, a private network that could move money, information, and influence across borders faster and more secretly than any king or government. His grand strategy was to establish a branch of the family bank in each of Europe's top financial hubs, with each one managed by one of his sons. They would not compete, they would collaborate, operating as a single, perfectly coordinated financial machine, all reporting back to the center. The eldest son, Amschel Mayer Rothschild, was destined to stay in Frankfurt. As the firstborn, he inherited the head of the firm and was tasked with managing the parent house, M.A. Rothschild und Söhne. Amschel was pious, conservative, and cautious. He was the anchor, the stable foundation for his more ambitious brothers. While they took risks in Europe's most dynamic capitals, Amschel consolidated their German operations, becoming the primary banker for the German Confederation and cultivating relationships with dozens of German princes. He was the respected, steady hand at the tiller in their homeland. The second son, Salomon Mayer Rothschild, was sent to Vienna in 1820. Vienna was the glittering capital of the mighty Habsburg Empire, a bastion of old-world aristocracy and political power. Salomon was the diplomat of the family. He was charming, patient, and masterful at navigating the formal, stiff world of the Austrian court. His primary target was the most powerful man in the empire, Prince Clemens von Metternich, the Austrian state chancellor and the architect of post-Napoleonic Europe. Salomon skillfully won Metternich's trust and became his personal banker and the state's primary financier. He funded huge projects, most notably Austria's first major steam railway, the Nordbahn, which connected Vienna to the empire's industrial heartlands. His success was so immense that in 1822 the Austrian emperor granted the title of baron to all 5 brothers, officially lifting the family from the ghetto into the ranks of European nobility. The youngest son, James Mayer de Rothschild, was dispatched to the most dynamic city in Europe, Paris. Arriving in 1812, James was the flashiest and most socially adept of the brothers. He dove headfirst into French high society, establishing the bank de Rothschild Frères. He became a patron of the arts, befriending artists like Rossini and Ingres, and hosting lavish parties at his legendary estate, the Château de Ferrières, which became the epicenter of Parisian society. But beneath the glamour was a razor-sharp business mind. He became the most powerful banker in France, financing the country's recovery after Napoleon, stabilizing the monarchy, and most importantly, funding the massive expansion of France's railway network with the Chemin de Fer du Nord. He dominated French finance for decades. The fourth son, Karl Mayer von Rothschild, was given what was perhaps the most challenging post, Naples. In 1821, he established a bank to oversee the family's interests on the politically fragmented Italian peninsula. Naples was the capital of the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, but Karl's influence spread far beyond. He managed finances for the Bourbon monarchy, but also for a host of Italian states, and his firm famously arranged substantial loans to the Vatican, which had been financially crippled by the Napoleonic Wars. Karl became the dominant financial power in Italy, operating in a complex and volatile political environment. But the real star, the financial supernova who shot the family into the stratosphere, was the third son, Nathan Mayer Rothschild. Sent to Manchester, England in 1798 with a small stake, he didn't even start in banking. He began as a textile merchant, but quickly used his connections and intelligence to triple his capital. In 1804, he moved to London, the undisputed financial capital of the world, and founded the bank N.M. Rothschild and Sons. Nathan was bold, aggressive, often gruff, and possessed an almost psychic feel for the markets. He was the one who took Prince Wilhelm of Hesse's money and, through a series of brilliant and daring investments in British government bonds, not only protected it, but multiplied it into an even greater fortune. He became the dominant force on the London Stock Exchange. What made this five-brother network so overwhelmingly powerful was their secret weapon: information. In an age when news traveled at the speed of a horse or a sail, the Rothschilds built a private intelligence network that was faster and more sophisticated than any government's. Using a complex system of private couriers, hired ships, and even carrier pigeons, they shuttled financial and political intelligence between their five banks. A secret decision made by Metternich in Vienna could be passed to Salomon, who would then dispatch a courier to his brothers in Paris, London, Frankfurt, and Naples, ensuring they all knew days or even weeks before the official announcement reached the public. This information advantage was almost unfair. They knew which way markets would move before anyone else. They perfected the art of arbitrage, simultaneously buying a bond or stock in one city where it was cheap and selling it in another where it was expensive, profiting from tiny price gaps that only existed because they had better and faster information. They communicated in a coded family language, a mix of Hebrew and German known as Judendeutsch, making their letters unreadable to prying eyes. Their business was their own. They answered to no one but each other. They created a system of finance that ignored borders and politics, allowing them to raise colossal sums of money by drawing on the capital and credit of all five banks at once. This network was more than just a business, it was a financial weapon. And as Napoleon Bonaparte set Europe on fire, that weapon was about to be put to the ultimate test. The Napoleonic Wars were the fire in which the Rothschild legend was forged. For more than a decade, from 1803 to 1815, Europe was a continental battlefield that burned through men, supplies, and astronomical amounts of money. Armies needed to be equipped, fed, and most importantly, paid in hard currency, gold and silver. But moving that specie across a war-torn continent through blockades and enemy territory was a logistical nightmare. For the governments of the coalition fighting Napoleon, it was a near impossible problem. For the Rothschilds, with their five coordinated branches, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. Their unique five-part network was perfectly built for this chaos. While other banks were trapped behind national borders, the Rothschilds operated seamlessly across them. They had clients and contacts on both sides of the war. This wasn't about treason, it was about business. To the Rothschilds, money had no flag. The British government, the financial engine of the alliance against Napoleon, had a huge problem. The Duke of Wellington's army was bogged down in Spain and Portugal, fighting the brutal Peninsular War against the French. His troops, a mix of British, Spanish, and Portuguese soldiers, were on the brink of mutiny. They hadn't been properly paid, and morale was collapsing. The government had chests of gold guineas in London, but no safe or reliable way to get them to Wellington. Any attempt to ship the gold directly would almost certainly be intercepted by French privateers or ground forces. In desperation, the British government turned to the one man they believed could solve the impossible: Nathan Mayer Rothschild. Nathan's plan was a work of absolute, audacious genius. He didn't even try to ship tons of British gold through enemy territory. Instead, he put the powerful family network into action. First, Nathan used the British government's money to purchase a huge quantity of gold from the powerful East India Company. Then, in a move that seemed insane to outsiders, he began selling that gold to his brother James in Paris. Why? Because James needed it to help finance one of Napoleon's own campaigns. James paid Nathan for the gold in French francs. Those francs were then secretly smuggled south by a network of Rothschild agents who used them to purchase local currency that was delivered directly to Wellington's army in Spain. Think about the sheer audacity and complexity of that operation. Nathan Rothschild used British government money to essentially fund a French transaction, all to generate the local currency needed to pay the British army that was actively fighting the French. He was, in effect, laundering a nation's war chest through his own family network and taking a healthy commission at every step of the transaction. It was a move no one else on earth could have pulled off. It worked perfectly. Wellington's soldiers got paid, the army held together, and the war effort was saved. In that moment, the Rothschilds proved they were not just bankers. They were an indispensable part of the war machine. But that was just the warm-up for their most legendary moment, the story that would cement their name in financial mythology forever, the Battle of Waterloo. The year is 1815. Napoleon has escaped from his exile on the island of Elba, and the fate of Europe hangs on one final, epic battle. On the floor of the London Stock Exchange, the price of British government bonds, known as consols, is swinging wildly with every rumour. A British victory would send their value soaring. A defeat would mean national bankruptcy and financial ruin. As the legend goes, Nathan Rothschild had his own agent, a man named Rothworth, positioned near the battlefield. The second Napoleon's defeat was certain, the agent raced for the coast, paid a fisherman an exorbitant fee to cross the stormy English Channel, and delivered the news directly to Nathan, a full 24 hours before the government's own couriers managed to arrive. The next morning, Nathan went to the stock exchange, stood in his usual spot at Rothschild's pillar, and with a grim, emotionless look on his face, he started to sell. He sold British consols, and he kept selling. The market watched in horror. Everyone knew Nathan had the best intelligence network in Europe. If he was selling, it could only mean one thing: Wellington had lost. Panic selling erupted. The price of government bonds crashed, plummeting to a fraction of their value. The market was in free fall. Then, just as the panic hit its absolute peak, Nathan quietly signaled his own agents, who were positioned all around the trading floor. They began to buy. They bought up every bond they could get their hands on, scooping them up for pennies on the pound. Hours later, the official news of Wellington's great victory finally arrived in London. The market went into a frenzy of euphoria. Bond prices shot through the roof, and Nathan Rothschild, now owning a mountain of them, had supposedly made a killer fortune, perhaps the greatest single-day trade in history. Now, historians today largely agree that this dramatic version of the story is an exaggeration, a powerful myth fueled by a mix of awe, envy, and anti-Semitism. It's highly unlikely he deliberately crashed the market and made millions in a single day. But the core of the story is true. Nathan's unparalleled intelligence network did get him the news of the victory first, and he absolutely used that information advantage to make significant, profitable trades before anyone else knew what was happening. The Waterloo affair, whether fact or myth, transformed the Rothschilds from merely successful bankers into living legends. They had proven on the world's biggest stage that in the new age of global finance, information was the most valuable and powerful currency of all. With the Napoleonic Wars over and their legends secure, the Rothschilds entered a new era. The 19th century was the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, and the family, with their usual incredible foresight, pivoted from financing wars to funding progress. They understood that the future of wealth was no longer just in government debt. but in the iron, steam, and steel that were physically and fundamentally changing the world. The Rothschild banks in London, Paris, Vienna, Frankfurt, and Naples became the go-to investors for the industrial age. They saw the massive potential of railways long before most governments or rival banks. They financed huge networks like the Chemin de Fer du Nord in France, run by James, and the Nordbahn in Austria, run by Salomon. These weren't just investments, they were strategic moves that connected industrial centers to ports, sped up the movement of goods and people, and created vast new markets that the family could then profit from. They were literally building the circulatory system for modern European commerce. Their reach extended deep into the earth itself. They financed enormous mining operations, becoming major players in the raw materials that fueled industry. They acquired major stakes in the Rio Tinto copper mines in Spain, helping to turn them into one of the world's largest copper producers. In a move that showed their global ambition, they helped fund Cecil Rhodes's De Beers Diamond Company in South Africa, giving them immense influence over the global diamond trade. They poured money into coal mines, ironworks, and metallurgy, the essential building blocks of the new industrial world. Perhaps the most famous story of their immense power and influence from this era involves the Suez Canal. In 1875, Ismail Pasha, the Khedive or ruler of Egypt, was on the brink of bankruptcy. To raise cash, he was forced to sell his country's 44% share in the vital Suez Canal. The French were poised to buy it, which would have given them total control over this critical shortcut to India, a prospect that terrified the British Empire. The British Prime Minister, Benjamin Disraeli, saw a golden opportunity, but he had a huge problem. Parliament was not in session, and he could not get authorization for the £4 million he needed, an astronomical sum at the time, equivalent to billions today. In a moment of national crisis, Disraeli did what European leaders did when they were in trouble. He went to the Rothschilds. He sent his private secretary to the London office of Lionel de Rothschild, Nathan's son and successor. As the story goes, Lionel, who was eating some grapes, listened to the urgent request. He paused, ate another grape, and simply asked, "When do you need it?" The secretary replied, "Tomorrow." Lionel looked at him and said, "It is yours." The British government had its money in a matter of hours. With that one swift, decisive deal, the Rothschilds enabled Great Britain to secure the lifeline of its empire and once again alter the course of geopolitical history. This incredible wealth brought them unprecedented influence and social status. Already barons of the Austrian Empire, they rose to the highest levels of society in every country where they operated. In Britain, after a long and difficult political battle against anti-Semitic restrictions, Lionel de Rothschild became the first practicing Jew to sit as a member of Parliament. His son, Natty, would later be raised to the British peerage as the first Lord Rothschild. They were trusted advisors to kings and confidants to prime ministers. They also cultivated a lifestyle that became legendary in its own right. Le goût Rothschild, or the Rothschild taste. They built a series of magnificent palaces and country estates across Europe, such as Waddesdon Manor and Mentmore Towers in England, and the Château de Ferrières in France. They filled these homes with priceless art, rare manuscripts, and exquisite furniture. The family became among the most important art collectors in history, and their vast collections would eventually form the foundation of many of the world's great museums through their bequests. But beneath all the glamour and the high society hobnobbing, the family was run by a strict internal code laid down by their founder, Meyer Amschel, in his will. It was a precise blueprint designed to preserve the family's power and wealth for generations. He demanded that control of the business remain exclusively with male heirs. The family's business dealings were to be kept absolutely secret. And, most significantly, to keep the family's vast fortune from being diluted by marriages to outsiders, he strongly encouraged them to marry within the family, often first or second cousins. For several generations, this practice of endogamy was common. ensuring that Rothschild wealth remained Rothschild wealth, consolidating their dynasty but also isolating them further. Through it all, their Jewish heritage remained a core part of their identity. Having started in the ghetto, they never forgot their roots. They used their immense wealth and political influence to fight for Jewish civil rights and emancipation across Europe and became enormous philanthropists, founding hospitals, schools, orphanages and social housing projects for Jewish communities. But their immense success, their privacy and their Jewish faith also made them a perennial target. As their power grew, so too did the dark myths and conspiracy theories, which twisted their real influence into something sinister, often using ancient anti-Semitic tropes to paint them as a shadowy cabal that secretly ran the world. The golden age of the Rothschilds, that unparalleled period of near-total dominance over European finance, couldn't last forever. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the world they had so skillfully mastered was changing at a rapid pace. New, aggressive economic powers, particularly a unified Germany and a booming United States, were rising to challenge British and French dominance. And the world of finance itself was evolving. Giant, publicly traded joint stock banks emerged in London, Paris and New York. Behemoths like J.P. Morgan that could raise vast amounts of capital from thousands of shareholders. This new corporate model began to challenge the private family-run partnership model that had been the very source of the Rothschilds' strength. The 20th century brought even bigger and more violent storms. The two world wars and the Great Depression not only devastated economies but also redrew the map of Europe, shattering the old order the Rothschilds had navigated so masterfully. Their vast international network, once their greatest asset, was now a vulnerability. The Naples branch, the first of the Five Arrows, had already closed in 1863 after the unification of Italy shifted the country's financial centre. The Frankfurt parent house, the family's cradle, closed in 1901 as there were no male heirs to take it over. A much worse blow came with the rise of the Nazis in the 1930s. The Vienna branch, SM von Rothschild, was completely destroyed following the Anschluss, Germany's annexation of Austria in 1938. The Nazi regime seized all of its assets and arrested Baron Louis von Rothschild, forcing him to sign over his fortune before he was allowed to flee for his life. It was a brutal, catastrophic end for one of the dynasty's great houses, and a terrifying reminder of the virulent anti-Semitism that had always lurked in the shadow of their success. And yet, the family endured. They adapted. They shifted their business model away from raising massive loans for governments and toward providing expert, discreet advisory services. After World War II, the surviving British and French houses re-established themselves as elite and highly respected institutions, specializing in the complex, brain-powered work of mergers and acquisitions, M&A, corporate restructuring, wealth management for the super-rich and private equity. The name Rothschild no longer meant the biggest bank in the world, but it still signified one of the most prestigious and trusted. The family also continued to evolve its global footprint, establishing a strong presence in the United States and opening offices all over the world, from Hong Kong to Sydney. Then, in 2003, in a historic move that their founder, Meyer Amschel, would have applauded for its emphasis on unity, the English and French branches, which had operated independently for nearly 2 centuries, formally unified under a single holding company, Rothschild and Company, led by Baron David de Rothschild. The core of the family business was finally back together. Today, Rothschild and Company is still a major force in global finance. It consistently ranks among the world's leading independent financial advisory groups, with thousands of employees in over 40 countries. While the legendary family fortune is now spread across many hundreds of descendants, their influence continues in many fields. It is visible in finance, in world-class winemaking with iconic brands like Chateau Mouton Rothschild and Chateau Lafite Rothschild, and in their ongoing contributions to science, art, and philanthropy. So what about the myths? The persistent conspiracy theories that claim the Rothschilds own all the world's central banks, control the media, and are the secret rulers of a new world order. These stories, nearly always soaked in anti-Semitism and recycled for new generations, are in a strange way a testament to the family's incredible historical impact. Their rise from the ghetto was so fast, their wealth so enormous, and their business dealings so intensely private that it was easy for people fueled by envy and bigotry to imagine their power as something dark, nefarious, or supernatural. The reality is that the Rothschilds' power was never a conspiracy. It was the result of a revolutionary business model, relentless ambition, unbreakable family discipline, and an uncanny genius for seeing where the world was going next. Their true legacy isn't hidden in the shadows. It's built into the very foundations of our modern financial world. They pioneered the international bond market, perfected the art of cross-border finance, and essentially created the blueprint for the multinational corporation. They proved that finance could be a global force, more powerful than armies and more influential than kings. The world we live in today, connected by invisible threads of capital that fly across the globe in an instant, is a world that Meyer Amschel Rothschild and his 5 sons helped to create. If you want to uncover more stories about the hidden powers that have shaped our history, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell. And let us know in the comments, which historical dynasty or financial titan should we investigate next?